Hello and welcome back to Super Respectable. My name is still David Lewis and my wonderful co-host Tosh
Yeah,
in Vancouver. How's it going over there?
I'm good. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So
Yeah,
uh, I had a baby. uh,
fantastic.
Thank you very much, little baby boy, baby Noah. Healthy, happy. Mom's doing healthy, happy. So because of that, you were nice enough to agree to my demand.
Well,
So
I didn't go rogue and like get a new co-host or anything like that.
but as anyone who has a new child knows, that sleep is deprived for the first couple of weeks. So I just knew I couldn't
Months,
function.
years.
Even now, I'm at like 50%. But it's good to be back. And thank you to all the listeners who kept listening. I've been following the analytics and the data, and like people still are listening to previous
Yes,
episodes. Thank
thank
you.
you, listeners. You're very loyal.
Very loyal. Loyalty is the most important thing.
It's the most important thing in life, isn't it?
It is. So yeah, but other than that, I'm doing well. Just enjoying a new member of the family. How about you? What's happening with you? Any new members of the family?
No, not that I know of,
Not that you
but
know.
yeah, all good, all as well here. We're just very happy for you, and it's
Thank you.
fantastic news.
Thank
And
you.
we look forward to having him on as a guest down the line.
Yeah, I think it'll be a pretty short interview. I think it'll just be minutes of
Well,
cooing and then some cooing and then end of discussion. But
well, maybe a short episode could be nice once in a while. We'll see.
there you go. Yeah, we
I'm
were.
a bit rusty with this podcast stuff. It's 2 weeks off. I don't know how to make
It's weird.
sentences and tell stories anymore. We'll see how this goes.
We'll just try our best. It'll be like our first episode again, which we did pretty
Yeah.
good. So but everything's good. And then I know you just told me before we recorded, the numbers are starting to kind of skyrocket again in the Netherlands because people are clubbing and partying and not paying attention.
Yeah, well, they were encouraged to go nuts. They lifted even the mask wearing requirement. And so what we found is when you go into shops and restaurants, people are telling us you don't have to wear that. You don't have to do that.
Oh, really? So
And people are kind of looking at us in a funny way. So yeah, it's not great. There's like 10,000 cases a day now, and it's quite likely that tomorrow, when the European Union like issues their kind of guidance, that the Netherlands will be red listed again and travel will be an issue.
uh,
So yeah, but the thing is, like, the vaccinations have helped. There's not like as many people going into the hospital and dying. So inshallah that continues.
so it could be one of those things where like, yeah, the cases are rising, but if you get enough people vaccinated, then it doesn't lead to deaths. Is that pretty much the
Yeah, I
message?
mean, it seems like the vaccines in use here um,
Efficient.
have an impact and they're helping. I mean, you could still get coronavirus with it, but the severity is diminished, and yeah, it seems to be okay. So we'll knock on wood that we get our second round of vaccinations in 2 weeks. So we'll try
Oh,
and stay strong and stay healthy and all that before.
yeah, we qualify on Saturday, so we can start registering after Saturday, and then hopefully we can get one by the end of the month, both my wife and I. But yeah, I mean, at least it's the only thing you can do. And then now that we have a little one, we're being extra cautious. We still wear our masks, and I don't care what anyone says. I'll keep wearing it even after. I don't care. And then just limiting and yeah, like it's funny that you said that because like we had so my mom has a physiotherapist and a nurse come. She was just out in the hospital, so she's back home. Come, and one of the nurses came into the house or physio without a mask, and then my sister's like, "Oh, could you wear a mask, please?" And he's like, "Oh, you don't have to wear it anymore." And she's like,
No way.
she's like, "Yeah, I know, but like we have a new infant in the baby house." And then he was very complying. He wore it, but I think people are just like really eager to take like the rip this like
But
both literal and metaphorical mask off there.
it's incredible though. Even like a health professional would do that. I mean,
Yeah,
you
I
think they
think.
would have that kind of understanding?
And whoever, if you're listening, Mr. Health Professional, we're not saying anything bad about you, but like, I think people get frustrated and they just can't deal with it because, like, in some place, theoretically, I know we've been going for like 18 months now, but like summer, like this summer, if you're in a city that has summer plans, for example, most plans are just canceled or events are canceled for the summer, right? Like, so like a lot of these places, like people have like right now summertime in Canada, and like the things you would be doing in the summer you can't do because they just don't exist anymore. And this is the second year in a row. So people are like starting to go crazy, right? And like kids are like out of school, and people don't have like people are out of work right now or on holiday. So like I think people are just getting frustrated and they're just like, listen, if I have the vaccine, whatever, let's just do it, right?
Yeah, I think once people have had their second round and they feel like it's time to party. So
Time to party.
well, I'll let you know how I get on 2 weeks after my second round. I'll probably be partying on a beach somewhere. We'll see.
Yeah, with a bunch of people. Sharing coffees.
But speaking of a beach, I think that brings me somewhat to the topic of today's episode.
I love the beach.
I'll try and keep it tight and focused on that. Right. Are you ready, Mr. Tosh?
I'm ready.
I'm also a bit conscious that you might get drawn into baby duty at any moment. So pardon the interruptions, dear listeners, but I hope you understand.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's do this. Back in business.
Let's do it.
So today, I think we're going to touch on something that has it's an Indian connection, but these people definitely, I think, wouldn't identify as Indians.
Okay.
So I want to talk about the Sentinelese people.
Oh, I don't know.
On the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
Oh.
Are you aware of them?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I didn't know the name of the people, the ethnicity, but I know the islands.
Yeah, so the islands, it's the island chain of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So that's found like, a few hundred kilometers, like directly south of Burma and Bangladesh.
Cool.
In the Bay of Burma.
Yeah.
It's called.
Yeah.
But I'm going to talk about specifically this one island, which has these people who are called the Sentinelese people. I'm pretty sure they don't even call themselves that. We just, other people have just said you're that, and they don't know it. But I didn't look into how that name came about.
Yeah.
So pardon the ignorance. But possibly because the island is called Sentinel Island, and then they just said, okay, you're Sentinelese. Maybe that's the reason. Anyways, so who are they?
Who are they?
They are indigenous people. They live on North Sentinel Island in the Indian Ocean.
Okay.
And like I said, it's part of this island chain, but it's like totally separate. Like you can't really approach them.
Yeah.
It's a very small island. It's about the size of Manhattan, so about 25 square kilometers.
Okay.
I think. Population of the Sentinelese is uncertain, but it's very small.
Okay.
There's about 50 to 200 Sentinelese who live there. That's just a random estimate. People can, eventually they did some population samples and they fly over their satellites. They can't really like go on the island and like take notes.
Right.
And I'll get into the reasons why that's not possible throughout this story.
Yeah.
So they're essentially a hunter-gatherer people.
Yeah, on it.
They're very I don't know what the right politically correct term is, but they're pre-industrial, I would say, even pre-agricultural. So they hunter-gatherers, right? They do what they do. So they do their own like fishing and hunting on the island. I don't even think there's coconuts on their island. So
really?
they're kind of stuck on it from that perspective.
Yeah.
But from what the few people who've come around to like check them out have said, they look very healthy. They look very fit. There's not really seems to be any kind of issues in terms of health issues that you may expect people who have to fend for themselves.
Sure.
They look pretty good. They have their own language, as you would expect, and no one really understands the language. So it's a bit of a challenge to establish communications with these people. So there have been various attempts from people who just won't leave them alone. Like essentially the story of these people is they want to be left alone.
Yeah.
They don't want to be bothered.
Don't we all?
People can't help themselves. Like people just want to like conquer new lands, and that's just the nature of stupid people.
Yeah.
And they've brought with them like people from the neighboring islands to be like, oh, well, maybe you can speak to them and understand what they're saying.
Oh,
doesn't work. And so the India administers the territory in name only. Like they also like let them do their own thing.
Yeah.
because they're hostile to outsiders. That's the main story here. Is they don't like people coming around, and there've been many instances of people coming by to try and like either in a friendly way or not so friendly way establish relations, and they've all essentially been chased out with arrows coming after them. And there's been a few cases of people being like killed by them. So I'll start off. So the first kind of identified and noted presence on the North Sentinel Island was identified in 1771 by the British East India Company.
Yeah.
So the ship just floating by, and they're like, "Oh, look at that! There's some like fires going or some lights." I can't imagine it was electricity. But hey, look at that! They're playing like Nintendo over there. No, it was 1771, so it was just, I assume, fires and whatnot. So they just saw that, but they didn't bother. They just floated by and didn't do anything. But there was some sort of documented, signs of life that were there. But so there were a few other attempts, but the next kind of bigger attempt to say hello to these people happened in 1880 when the British Royal Navy, in a very small way, it was a naval officer named Maurice Vidal Portman.
Okay.
He was actually the governor of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, so their larger island chain.
Sure.
And at the time, that island chain was essentially a penal colony. So just prisoners were sent there, I guess, from mainland in India or from the UK. I'm not entirely sure.
Sorry, quick question. So the islands are still Indian territory?
Well, I mean, at the time, I guess British colonialism and whatnot. So there was never really a claim at that time.
Yeah.
It was very much like so isolated and remote that they were left to their own devices, I guess.
Got it.
And so it was always of interest because since like the 1770s, people knew that they existed, but it was kind of remote, challenging land to get to.
Right.
And so this dude was like, okay, let's give it a shot. So he brought like some locals, some of his prisoners along with him, where they arrived, and then they kidnapped 6 Sentinelese and brought them back to like the town where he was the governor of.
Yeah.
And very quickly, the 2 adults that they brought died from like sickness interacting with other people, as what happens with people who don't have immunity from dealing with foreigners.
Yeah.
As was discovered by the locals in the Americas in a very, very terrible way.
Do you think this still happens today? Like, do you think like...
Absolutely.
You think so? Our immunity naturally hasn't gotten stronger, you think, as a human
species? Well, for these people, right?
Yeah,
so they haven't. So they don't have any history of interacting. So I assume they would get totally wiped out because they don't have any vaccines or any kind of modern medicine, right?
Of course.
So they realized, okay, we're like toxic to these people, and so the children got sick out of the 6 people, and they quickly sent them back. They're like, okay, we're gonna end up killing all of them. So they sent them back. They basically dropped them at shore with some gifts to be like, sorry, we did that. And that certainly did not help the Sentinelese perception of outsiders. Like, you took our people, you killed off 2 of them, and then you made them sick.
Yeah.
So, but apparently, so a lot of the stuff, if you read about now, they'll blame this dude for causing all the problems. But there have been like other people who kind of poked around there, and they had like arrows thrown at them. So the hostility was kind of there. But this guy like really cemented in the Sentinelese mind that, don't let any outsiders near us because you'll die.
Yeah.
I think that's basically the mentality there. Yeah. So what's next? Yeah. The other thing was this Portman guy was weird. He did this like typical colonial thing of like messing around with locals, but he had a very weird kind of obsession with the Andaman Island people's physique. Because as I said, they were very fit and very healthy looking people. And he thought that was very nice. And he started taking pictures and making them pose, and then taking pictures of their body parts and made like photo albums, which you can Google if that's floats your boat.
I don't think that should float anyone's boat. But,
I should not float any. Yeah, so he really took an obsession. He was like obsessed with how like good looking the men were.
okay.
So I'm not sure what really motivated that, but there's loads of pictures of Andaman people.
Yeah.
And maybe stories got back to the North Sentinelese being like, we don't want this guy taking pictures of us either.
Yeah.
So that's not cool. That's a very strange 19th century European thing to do, I guess.
I think that was also, sorry, just on a side note, like I know it's like we laugh about it, but if you look at history, like they did it as well, sort of to the same degree during World War II. The Nazis would be like measure and take photos and document like body parts of the Jewish people and the Gypsies and etc. I think it's a form of colonialism as well. Like
it's like power. It's like I have control over you. I can document you and measure you.
Something like that. There's always this like weird, like when it comes to colonialism, like you're supposed to be like the colonial oppressor is usually supposed to have like power over the oppressee. But I think there's also us like, and like, you know, you're supposed to hate your oppressee as well. But I think there's like a fascination power dynamic between the two from upper to downer. So like when you said it, I mean, I wasn't surprised of it too, because colonialists do really weird shit, you know, like all the time.
Yeah, you're right to mention that the Nazis, because that's the most extreme form. But there's many instances of like when there's these power dynamics. Of, you know, the Japanese also did it, and they had these weird experiments they would carry out on their prisoners.
Yeah,
and you know the Belgians in the Congo were doing horrible things. So, yeah, I think it's just par for the course of just being a nasty colonial power, authoritarian control over people makes you do really stupid and messed up things.
I mean, we don't have to go into extensive details about it too, but I think if you look at any war, any major horrific event, even up until like the last couple years as well, like there's always people in power that are finding ways to control others other than physically as well, right? So like mental control, emotional control. I was learning like when I was doing my master's in human rights, which is the best degree ever. And, I learned about how in Bosnia during the '94 war, they used rape as a tool of war as well, right? The oppressors. So like it's fascinating, of course, horrific, but very interesting from an academic point of view how they did it. And so this guy clearly had some type of weird like Freudian homosexual like appreciation, but like fascination. But at the same time, it was his form of colonialism. But sorry, I digress. But I thought that was a unique point.
No, that's a very good compliment to the story, Tosh. Oh. And yeah. So all these weird things were kind of noted by the Indian government, because in the 20th century, when India got independence, they were much more responsible than the previous people who were in charge. And so India got its independence in 47, 48, right?
Yeah.
Those years. I apologize, Indian listeners.
We covered both. It's one of those two.
It's one of those two. So in 1954, India declared the island a tribal reserve. And so they banned any kind of travel within like a 5-6 kilometer radius around the island.
Oh, cool.
And so they realized that these people should be left alone. And I think they also realized that their Indians would get attacked, or people would start getting attacked if they kept trying it. Yeah. So that was one of their measures. They also banned photography of the people. So they kind of wanted to ban all this kind of weird stuff that people were doing to try to document the tribe and just basically stop bothering them.
Yeah.
And they enforced it with like a naval patrol, or I don't know what it was, maybe a lower level, like a boat kind of going around, making sure that no one's doing anything to them. But it's important to note that they didn't actually have territorial authority over the island. They didn't yet, it wasn't considered part of India.
Okay.
And so that was still kind of in the back of the mind of the Indian government. So in 1970, they established formal control over the island by, apparently what they did was they like somehow made it ashore, and they just put down a rock that said like, this is India's land, don't touch it, don't mess around. I'm sure the Sentinelese were like, whatever, we don't care. Yeah, leave us alone. But I could see like the idea behind it. The logic behind it makes sense because, it was essentially a lawless place, in international law. So what's to stop, a neighboring country or someone making a territorial claim and like going to wipe out the Sentinelese and doing all that. So maybe some benevolent intentions by India to just sort of protect them and to keep them from harm from various other states. Who knows?
Yeah.
But so I say all these nice things about the Indian government, but at the same time, they did have some people poking around. I think there were like government sanctioned trips from dignitaries who were like, I want to go see the Andaman Islands. I want to go see this. And they said, okay, fine. We're going to take you on a boat trip here. basically, that sounds like what happened. Like National Geographic went by, Indian anthropologist went by, I can't remember his name, but he did a bunch of trips. And it was all relatively friendly. Yeah. But the thing is, like, what we think is, oh, we're doing it, we're just trying to be nice. Yeah. But like, you can kill people with kindness, because if you're going to go there and like offer them stuff, you could actually kill them because you're going to give them some disease that you have and you don't know you're doing it. So they did multiple trips by the sounds of it, and like, here's some coconuts, here's some food and whatever. But like, who knows what the adverse effects of that would be, right?
Totally.
Yeah, so apparently, like when National Geographic went by, there's this kind of semi-famous story of the director had an arrow shot into his thigh. Like, no. Yeah. So the director was like, they're like filming stuff, and then so the Sentinelese were like, what the hell are you doing? And they just shot him.
Yeah.
So that's been the typical reaction of the Sentinelese. It's like, most of the time during these excursions, they would kind of be like, okay, we'll take the coconuts if it was a semi-friendly encounter.
Yeah.
Apparently what helped was, most of the time when these trips were happening, they met a terrible response if they arrived with kind of their own guns and weapons. And the Sentinelese were like, this doesn't look good. So they just fired arrows at them and they went away.
Yeah.
But if they showed up, and there are some videos, there's like a few videos you can check out where the people arriving had their hands up, and they just like already had the coconuts in their hand to be like, look, we don't mean harm. And so generally speaking, so then they would throw the coconuts into the water, and the Sentinelese would come out and just grab the coconuts and then bring them back to shore.
Yeah.
And then they'd either go like, thanks, or they would bring them to shore, gather the presents, and then start firing arrows to be like, okay, thanks, get lost. We don't want you anymore.
Yeah.
Because they'd be like, what else can you do for us? We don't see the purpose for this.
Yeah.
And then these videos are kind of funny because these Sentinelese seem to have a sense of humor. Apparently one of their like signs to be like, time for you to go sort of thing is they'll do like a defecating action. To be like, they'll just sort of bend over and like aim their butts toward them, so they'll moon them.
Yeah.
Or they'll whip their genitals around in a circle and be like, get lost. So they do all these kind of obscene gestures kind of thing to be like, get lost and go home now.
Yeah.
So those trips stopped in 1996, where the Indian government said, okay, enough of this. Like, we were doing these things. Now it's really time for this stuff to stop. Yeah. So it really ceased in 1996. So you can check out, I think the last really good footage was from 1991. Mm-hmm. I'll send some of the stuff around. It'll attach to the episode post. And it's kind of cool. Like, they had some pretty good footage of the Sentinelese, and you can kind of see them do these reactions. They'll be like, thanks for the coconut. And then they kind of bugger off kind of thing.
Yes.
And they have their own weapons. So they have kind of some metal devices along with their arrows. So it seems like you never really know from this video whether they're going to snap at any moment and like start attacking you. So there was some tension there.
Yeah. But
by and large, it looked like a friendly visit. So the next couple of stories, and maybe you're aware of these ones because they're semi-famous.
Okay.
So the next small one was obviously the tragedy. There was the Indian Ocean tsunami. Obviously, you remember that horrible led to disaster all across the Indian Ocean.
04, right?
2004, exactly, right. And so the Indian government policy after 1996 was don't bother these people, only if there's some sort of calamity or maybe there's an invasion that we know about where someone's trying to harm them. That was their only instance where they said, okay, we're going to send a helicopter or something to protect them. So it seems like it's a really good policy that they have now, and they mean well by it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, after this tsunami, the Indian government sent a helicopter over to scope it out and see, like, is anybody left? Because where they were was very much like in the path of the tsunami, like the worst of it, and they could have all been wiped out by that, right?
Yeah.
It was such a huge, massive tsunami that could have killed off the 100 people pretty easily.
Yeah.
But it seems like they were okay because the helicopter was met with a barrage of arrows from the locals.
Oh, really?
So it seems like it's a good response. Maybe if they were needing help, they would be like, I guess this is a normal reaction to wave your arms in the air and say, help us.
Yeah.
And that I do remember that. I remember that's when I personally like got to know them because there was some media articles that showed there was pictures taken at that time by the Indian government, and they were kind of circulated in the media. I don't know if you remember that, but there was like a few pictures of them.
I don't remember that per se, but when you started talking about the Sentinelese, and I Googled it while you were speaking, I saw a photo that I'd seen in the past, and I remember I know of them. And
I think that photo is possibly the same one from that time. It's kind of blurry, and they're kind of aiming in the air.
That's right.
That was the one taken by the helicopter. So all pretty quiet after that. There has been sporadic incidents over the years. There's one smaller one of some Indian, I don't know if they're Indian fishermen or it's just random fishermen from the area, and they fell asleep. They had the misfortune of
their boat kind of
falling asleep while they were fishing, and their boat floated ashore.
Yeah,
and they died. They were murdered by the Sentinelese, so they never made it back. And but then this brings me to this is probably the most famous incident now. Do you know what I'm talking about? There was this American guy who came, missionary.
Yeah.
And he wanted to, essentially the same thing. He wanted to spread Christianity to the Sentinelese in 2018.
Yeah.
Remember this? Yeah.
And they killed him, right?
They killed him.
Yeah.
So this got like global, international attention. It was like front page news for like a week because of the ridiculousness of the story. So it was this guy, his name was John Allen Chow.
Yeah.
Young guy, around 26, 27 years old at the time. But it was basically his life. I watched a video about him, and he was very religious guy, but also really into outdoors. And kind of combining these things, this fascination with uncontacted tribes around the world. And he kind of fell in with this missionary group that wanted to keep spreading Christianity to these uncontacted tribes. And it's a bit of a rogue missionary group. I think by and large, the missionaries around the world, they go to, I don't know, people who practice other religions, but are more established in their ways. But these guys go to really uncontacted and vulnerable tribes around the world. Which you shouldn't do. Just leave people alone.
That seems logical. Yeah, I think that's a general.
I mean, I have my views on missionaries, anyways. I just think just leave everyone alone and stop bothering people. But
for a general rule, I think people shouldn't go to isolated places in the world. Generally speaking.
Yeah. So this guy was pretty naive in his approach.
He's like, I can do it.
He was just operating on his own here. From what I read.
Yeah.
So I don't know where he got the money from. Maybe I really don't know. Maybe he got donations or whatever. He traveled to the island illegally, of course, because you're not meant to do that. So to do that, he bribed some local fishermen. He paid them for them probably a lot of money, like $400, $500. He said, "Take me to the island."
Yeah.
And apparently, they took him pretty close by, and they said, "No, we're not going to go that much closer." And they said, "You should be careful because these people will try and kill you."
Yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, I know. And by the way, the reason why this story is pretty well known is that John, the missionary, wrote pretty detailed letters and the fishermen managed to like keep them, and so it's a pretty good record. So John went 3 times to the island. He made 3 attempts to establish contact with them.
Yeah.
And obviously the third time was the least successful because that's where he was killed. So the first time, what happened? Yeah, so the fisherman took him there, and then he had his own like kind of boat to take him there, and he had a waterproof Bible.
Okay.
And he arrived on shore, but then he got a very quick negative response. Like he had to run back to his boat and like quickly get out of there, and like reconsider his approach.
Yeah.
He came back a second time, and this is kind of funny because it's so naive. I really don't know what he was thinking. So because he was trying to communicate to them and explain like Christianity, but these people don't speak a word of English, let alone any other language at all, right? They speak their language. So I don't know how he was planning to do this.
Yeah.
Apparently he tried to communicate to them in Xhosa, you know, that South African language, which is like clicks. Because he had previously done a missionary trip there to probably convert them or something stupid. And so he started speaking that and making other noises. And the Sentinelese just started laughing. They're like, this guy's totally nuts. And so they were laughing, or they were either laughing or just staring at him, being like, they didn't know whether to just like kill him right away or just think, let's just watch this guy. It's kind of entertaining. You know, they laughed at. Yeah.
So as a side note, sorry, I just think so. It must not have been like their first reaction to someone of Asian descent, right? Probably like of Chinese Asian descent, but they would have been like, I wonder if all Asians speak like this. Like,
yeah, I can only imagine what's going through their head because they had so many people could stop by.
Yeah,
but because the gap is like 10, 15 years between.
Yeah, it would have been like the previous generation or something.
So like this is like each new generation gets a new visitor.
Yeah, like,
and this one would be like, oh my god.
So confusing.
So this one, I can imagine they're like, let's not kill him. It's pretty entertaining to have this for a little bit.
Yeah.
But apparently a boy came by, a little boy, and like shot an arrow at him. To be like, shut up. And so the boy shot an arrow, and actually maybe God was watching over John because the boy actually pierced the Bible that he was carrying. So it like probably would have killed him. So it went right through the Bible.
So he got John, right? He got out of there, no?
So he got out of there. So during this time, he was also singing like Christian songs and hymns and stuff, and they were just like, okay. So the adults are probably listening to him and being entertained, but the kid was like, enough of this, shot it. So he came back a third time, and this time the fishermen were being like, what are you doing? You're really tempting fate here. This is kind of extreme. Like, you had a pretty clear warning that you're going to die. And he, at that point, it seems like he was resolved that he was going to die. He was going to like die trying to do this.
Yeah.
Because in his letters, like the last letters, he got more extreme. He was like, I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing, but I have to continue with the mission because of God and all this stuff. So this is a quote from his letter. He said, I think it's worthwhile to declare Jesus to these people. Please do not be angry at them or at God if I get killed. Don't retrieve my body.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
So that was written in his last letter. And so the fishermen, they like, sure, we'll take your money, but we told you. They kind of like hovered around because they kind of, I guess at that point, were interested to see what was going to happen. They apparently, I don't think they saw him getting killed, but they later saw the islanders like dragging John's body around, and they kind of just left his body on the shore.
Yeah.
And I think what they do is there were like decades ago when they last killed some people who were kind of hostile, is they leave the bodies on the shore as a message to any other outsiders to just be like,
message.
Don't even try.
Yeah.
I think that must be what their reason is. And so what happened was this got international attention because the fishermen came back and like told whoever, and then the word spread because obviously an American citizen, it's a pretty big deal. And so this got huge attention globally. It was talked about in CNN and all the big New York Times, all the media outlets. It was massive news. And then there was discussion around like, do we press charges? Like, do we like do a murder investigation, right? Because it's an American citizen, it's a big deal. So in the end, what happened was the fishermen were charged with helping, like aiding and abetting this guy.
Yeah.
I don't know how serious the charges were, but then the U.S. government, unusually perhaps for the U.S., they said we're not going to press charges.
Oh.
The Indian government also said, this was just a huge violation and they were defending themselves, I guess. So there was never kind of like a proper, attempt to, who was the one who killed this guy. But what there was an attempt to retrieve his body and like repatriate the body.
No way. That's cool.
But again, they decided in the end, they made a few attempts, so they tried to go. There was a hostile response. So in the end, they were like, "Okay, this is too risky," and they're like, "We can't." And so the body was apparently like properly buried, from what they could make out. Like the body wasn't on the shore anymore.
So you mean the Sentinelese people buried it?
Apparently, they buried him, and I guess they gave him a proper burial or whatever. But there was no like. It was kind of respected. The Indian government like didn't try and invade and like do some sort of repercussion. Maybe that if an American citizen is killed abroad for nefarious reasons, there might be a kind of pretty aggressive response from the U.S. government to say, "Hey, what's going on here?" Yeah. But I think it's pretty clear like they didn't want to have a huge diplomatic uproar if they were trying to do something like that, and they respected them.
And even in this case, it's be like who would you charge and how would you punish them? Like
you couldn't do anything really, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's a pretty clear indication that you should leave these people alone.
Yeah.
Stop bothering people, and but in reading these cases, because there's just so many instances, it's like the impression I got is just I think it's interesting to know about these people, and of course you wouldn't know that these people existed unless it was people exploring and checking them out.
Totally.
But at the same time, I'm like, stop bothering them.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the world is curious and wants to know more. Yeah. But the more you get curious and the more you want to explore them, the more you're likely to kill them off. So I just think like leave it alone. We know what we know now, and that's it.
Yeah, that's all we could have done at this point. So out of all the Andaman Islands and the Nicobar Islands, these guys are on just one island, or they're on multiple islands?
They're only on this island.
On this island.
I believe this is the only one out of the island chain where it's the uncontactable tribe.
Okay, the other ones
where the other one is a bit more mainstream. They
have the Nintendo.
I can't say. I don't know, but like, I mean, there's a proper city on Andaman Island, and there's roads and stuff. So it's like developed in a sense. But this is the one where it's not.
Oh, it's not. Okay, so it's the island. And John and Mr. I forgot his name, Jeff. Did he make all three trips in like one, like on the same trip, or was it like over
same trip?
Same trip. Go back to the fishing.
Yeah.
Come back and go back to the fishing.
I think he like went back to Andaman mainland and then go back again.
Yes.
And like kind of figure things out, then go back again. But it all happened, I think, in the month of November 2018. So I think he's like, this is it. Go for broke. This is your big trip.
Yeah.
Apparently he did like training for it. He in North America, he did all these like workouts and camping trips and did all sorts of like preparations for this, because it's a huge deal to like fly from the US to India and then get to these islands, because these islands are not easy to get to, then to find someone to take you there. So this guy was super dedicated.
I agree with you in the sense that I don't think people should put their lives in danger for something so silly. Like if we as a civilization have tried and it did not work out, we should just let it be. It should just be a mystery of the world. But I mean, I understand curiosity, human nature, wanting to know these groups of people, like how they survive, how they live, everything. But if they don't want to be bothered, just leave them alone. And I think it's pretty fatal at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, I understand, Europeans can get very excited by they're the leading colonial powers, and they conquered the quote unquote new world. And of course, you wouldn't be living in Vancouver and all that if it wasn't for this. But North Sentinel Island, I think we can agree, just leave that alone. It's a little speck of island.
Yeah.
But I really think it's hard maybe to maintain it over the years because you never know. It's like there's always going to be some group of people who are like, maybe there's a mine there, maybe there's something of value there,
Oh, economic.
something we can take, and the capitalism takes over, and then that's it. That's the end
And
of
then
it.
like Starbucks builds a Sentinel
And
Island,
then there's a
a gate
Uber
store,
Eats
yeah,
delivery.
with lunch and stuff. Yeah, it's cool. I wonder what these people do though on a day-to-day basis, like how big the island is, and they probably just kind of hang out and uh, they probably just
Yeah,
hang
it's
out.
interesting because like I always imagine we talked about this on previous episodes. I always imagine an island like that. It's tropical, semi-tropical, I guess. There'd be coconuts. I just think coconuts,
Yeah,
and they would live off of off of that. But apparently, there's no there's no
yeah,
coconuts. I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of fish. They have a lot of. They're good
yeah,
fisher people. Uh, it's sizable enough that inland they find stuff to eat.
yeah.
But from the video from that 1991 clip, they look pretty healthy. They got some nice white teeth. I always wonder, like, the dental care. Like
Yeah, how?
they always say to people, they always tell us, go to the dentist every 6 months to a year. I
Yeah,
haven't been since Corona, by the way.
yeah. I've
Um,
been in a long time.
no.
Yeah.
Okay, so
How,
like,
how do they manage? How do they maintain
how
it?
do they manage that? Like, if they have some sort of
Yeah,
thing, maybe they just sort of bash it out, and
like Tom Hanks style in Castaway.
because
Uh,
that's a feature of Castaway, right? The dental care.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they have maybe they have an island dentist like who takes care of stuff. I think a lot of our cavities in the modern world are problems with teeth are due to kind of like the sugars and the foods and the unnatural things we eat.
Yeah.
I think the fact that they probably aren't introduced to those kind of things helps, but they probably have remedies for stuff because they've survived for so long. They're people, right? So like medicinal or dental remedies for things from the island as well. And I'm sure their diet is much healthier than ours if they're looking good and healthy up there, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could take a trip and like ask them like what's your diet, and
I'll stay
do
on
a
the boat.
cookbook or something. Yeah.
But
But do you think they are all, because it's such a small group, it's like 50 to 100 ish
yeah,
people.
yeah.
Do you think they all have to be generalists, like have to be equally good at something, or at that level they can have specialists? Like you're the tent maker, you're the cook. Like how would that work?
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think like this. We don't know a lot about them, but I mean, where did they come from? Like most nomadic tribes of these things, they have like they're kind of like hunter gatherers, right? Like that's sort of the idea they came from. So I think most of their day is probably like men probably getting food is my prediction. Women probably like cooking and like taking care of the family. Um, like I don't think you have like different occupations like we do. I think most of it's just survivalist.
No, I didn't ask if they were accountants.
Yeah, they're CPA and
Some kind.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a specialist perspective, more based on gender, I think, based on what I've seen. And
Hmm.
I think, like I said, men do this, women do this, they survive. I mean, one of the things I think that's interesting is that because there's not that many of them, but the outside world has tried to make contact over generations. So, I mean, you probably heard from your dad or grandpa about like the white guy who came 30 years ago, and then your dad told about the Chinese, like, the black guy who came last
Yeah,
year.
the stories get passed on,
And then
right?
these guys will talk about the Chinese guy who came 3 times, and then so like
Yeah.
they definitely, they definitely, like, generations definitely have heard stories of the outside world and they're aware of it, but like they're in for surprises. Like you might get like a Latino guy next time coming around, and
Do you
so
think like with drones, maybe like if drones
drones,
get enough range, someone might like fly some stuff over there and like drop some or make some other approaches?
yeah, maybe. I think, I don't think this is the end of the story. I think there's always going to be people that are interested in it for economic reasons or
Mm.
interest reasons. I mean, like just to know, because it's like we want to know. But like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe so like no one's made it actually like into the middle of the island, right? I'm assuming it's like up to the shore is pretty much where.
Yeah, I checked it out. I don't think so. I think some people have gone pretty far in,
Yeah,
but it looks quite densely forested
forested.
from the Google Earth
Yeah,
checkout I did. It was
yeah.
kind of interesting.
And,
Very small.
you got
Yeah,
to remember, like, if you come onto this island, you'll not only are you literally the foreigner, but like you don't know what's happening. These guys like know every
they
trail.
know everything that's going on.
Yeah, so like they'll hunt you down, man. That's scary stuff. And like,
So if you were to go on a mission with your co-host and upset these people by bringing them something,
yeah,
what do you think the most useful tool or thing you could bring them would be aside from a coconut?
So I have, if it's okay with you, I'll break it into two. There's one that I think would be most like practical, and then one that I think is impractical but would be fun.
Hmm.
The one that's practical would probably be like medicines and stuff like that, just so like they can.
Yeah, you think?
I think so. I mean, food, they've survived for this long, so food is not, doesn't seem to be an issue. But I mean, medicine, like you don't have to interact with the outside world to get sick. You can get sick by yourself too. Colds, fevers.
Hmm.
Maybe they just build a tolerance up for it. But I'd
Hmm.
probably bring him some general medicines that could get food poisoning you can get, right?
I get some vodka. Give them some vodka.
Vodka. Then you have a good time. And then for an impractical thing, I'd probably bring them like a TV or a computer just for the screen purposes of it.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think
Yeah.
like an iPad, and then
Then they're like,
show them like I think the most interesting thing I think would be like their reflection, so they
Yeah.
could see themselves.
yeah,
Because mirrors, I mean, that's not easy to make, right?
that's not easy to. Maybe they don't know what they look like. That's true. That's
Can you imagine not knowing what you look like your whole life?
yeah. Well, I had this theory growing up that what if what we saw in the mirror wasn't really us? Like, what if we?
Oh my God.
That's deep. But
The BC bud is strong over there.
too early in the morning, man. What about you? What would you bring if you had the ability to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good call. I think iPad or some sort of thing to video, like photograph or show them some pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of like something where you could leave it behind and they would find it useful.
Like
Solar,
I'm not
sure, like maybe some garden tools. They could do some agriculture, like a hoe or a pickaxe or something like that. I don't
what
know.
if they use it to kill the next victim? Then you've aided.
But they probably give it to them, and they would just kill you with it.
Yeah. I think I would definitely like, without putting human beings in danger, it'd be interesting to learn more about them from like an anthropological and archaeological perspective.
Yeah,
But they
you
seem
could like speed up their process, like give them some agricultural tools,
yeah.
and see if they start doing. But I think that's kind of messing around with them too much.
Do you think anybody knows their language? Like any linguists or anyone knows any?
I find that so interesting. It's kind of like a Rosetta Stone thing.
Yeah,
Because like I said, they brought some people from the neighboring islands.
Yeah.
But I read something being like, if you think French, Italian, Spanish is connected, but you wouldn't automatically say a French speaker can speak Italian.
Totally.
Imagine what it would be for like an Andaman Island person who hasn't had contact with this island, where they've also like not interacted. So imagine the language gap that exists there, even for the closest related one.
Totally. Huh. It's an interesting.
I don't know.
I'm gonna Google.
Because definitely that video, you can hear them saying stuff.
Yeah.
In the 1991 clip.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
Do you know where this came from originally? Sorry, some Sentinelese people, like the original origins of the ethnicity.
There is a map, but they are very dark skinned.
Yeah.
So, they have more like sub-Saharan African look to them than what I would say is the look of someone from the Indian subcontinent.
Yeah.
They're definitely darker.
Yeah.
So.
And a while back, right? Like they probably came to the island a long time ago.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. I need to read up more on it, but it's so hard to like develop a history around it, right? Because if you can't interact and speak to them,
yeah,
you'll never learn.
It's kind of ironic to think that back when like modern day colonialism, or the results of modern day colonialism happened like in Canada when the Brits went around the world, that like they just kind of entered and did their thing. And now in 2021, when we have all the technology and we're more modern, we can't go into this small little island anymore, right? I mean, I guess theoretically we could if we really forced ourselves on, but by choice we've decided not to. So it's kind of the opposite of what it should have been, or not should have been of happening. But yeah,
I don't mean this in a bad way, but I think this is kind of like it poses the challenge of like, if we were to meet aliens, it's always like, how would you speak to them and communicate?
Yeah.
And how would you explain that you don't mean harm and you don't mean to hurt them?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing here. I mean, obviously they're not aliens; they're very nice people to themselves.
Yeah.
But how do you begin to establish communications with something that you don't have a chain of communications with?
in the movies, it's like always mathematics. In alien encounter movies, they're always like math is a universal language. But in this situation,
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it's a very interesting point of view.
like the peace sign probably wouldn't help.
Yeah, because they don't
That's not
understand.
that's not
I mean,
universal, or like
you
hands up,
mentioned this
hands up.
earlier up, and that's sort of, but like, I'm speaking from a human perspective that I know that this means like I'm unarmed, right? Like the
Hmm.
white flag means like no arms or whatever. But like these guys don't have any of that stuff, right? So like, I mean, I guess you could just walk up like with shorts and like with your hands up or naked or something, and so they're just like, this guy's got nothing on him. But like I
But
wouldn't.
there's precedent, I guess, because in North America, when the Europeans were roaming around conquering it,
Mm,
they established connections with the local indigenous tribes, right? And they must have found a way to establish communications in the end.
yeah. Well, I
I
mean,
don't know.
if history serves me right, like it wasn't the most genuine
No,
relationship.
I guess, like eventually it becomes clear if you spend time and
Sure.
you form a relation
Yeah.
that you can understand the language. Like when you learn any language,
Sure.
you can see if someone says a word or a sound over and over again to something, then you can start building the connection. But it's just so interesting to me how you would have that initial conversation to be like, don't shoot, don't hurt.
Yeah.
Let's try and learn from each other.
Yeah. Yeah. It's especially in the modern day when we think we know everything already, that there's still like things that we don't know. Fascinating. Very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, there's also uncontacted. So there's an NGO called Survival International,
Yeah.
very interesting NGO,
Yeah.
and their whole ethos is to protect groups like this because
Oh,
there's many uncontacted
are there
tribes, they're called,
many?
around the world. Yeah, so I think the other big grouping of uncontacted tribes would be in South America, like in Brazil, and like in the Amazon and stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's of course others, but I think this one is one of the like truest because they're on an island and it's so remote.
Yeah.
But of course, going into the Amazon is a big challenge too. So Survival International has like a whole list of uncontacted or like endangered peoples who they're working to try and help and protect because of rapacious Catholics and capitalists.
Interesting. Thank you, Dave, for presenting. Fascinating topic. A good one for after our 2-week hiatus. But
Yes, it's a very interesting topic, and
yeah, we'll post links and photos and tell us what you think. Maybe I'd love to hear from people in India, like about kind of what they've heard about the Sentinelese people, if that's.
Yeah, it'd be great to have some feedback to this episode and fact check my story.
And if anyone from the actual islands wanna, have the people want.
If you're listening over there, yeah.
We're like, that's why we need the screen and the computer so they can listen to our podcast.
Absolutely.
Anyways,
all right, Tosh. Well, thank you for listening, and yeah, we're back in business.
We're back in business. Have a good one, Dave. Talk soon.
Take care, Tosh.